Welcome to Permission to Evolve. I'm your host, Brandon Thielk. I'm a performance and life coach. I'm joined by my co-host and producer, Holly Deschenes. So the last few weeks, we've been talking about the permission to make mistakes, the permission to admit fault, and today we're going to be going into permission to release guilt. Generally, the mistakes are how we accrue guilt, and that interplays with shame as well. And that's what really stagnates energy. And we really get into trouble when we start to make our mistakes part of our self-image or our identity, where that really prevents our ability to move forward from these things. It can just be an event that we use to learn from, but sometimes we can carry these things with us for a very long time. It's really important to be able to process these things. And the way we're going to get into releasing guilt is pretty similar to things we continuously talk about, but it is about taking a deeper look at these things, unpacking them, learning from them. And once we complete that learning, we're just naturally going to align in a better way. We're going to just kind of intuitively know what actions to take. We learn to navigate life better so that we're not creating the same mistakes and problems over and over again. It's really about breaking these cycles. And guilt is a big one because really it starts to create some like self-destruction. I'm a bad person or I did something wrong. And so I need to punish myself for that. Shame is really this idea that I am bad. And so we start to intertwine these things in our identity, and it can really stagnate things and just really affect our perception about what we deserve in life and how we can move forward. I look forward to digging into this. Really, it is this heavy self image that we're taking forward, and it's really that's what creates the sabotage. And so it's allowing ourselves to make the mistakes. It's allowing ourselves to admit fault when we have that recognition. And then that's also what's going to be freeing up that energy from the past that we're carrying the guilt with. Just opening up here, Holly, is there anything that comes to mind? Guilt can be kind of a tricky thing. It makes us less of ourselves. It's like I start doing more people pleasing. I start showing up differently with a little bit of that shame intertwined there. And it can really stop us from taking the steps because it kind of is that idea of I deserve something or not. So any thoughts on this as we get started?
There's a couple things. Just there's things like around the word guilt. We joke a lot in my house that my husband is a recovering Catholic, and a lot of that has to do with the guilt, right?
Hmm.
That kind of upbringing in a strict religious home.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot to your point of shame and things like that that can come through from an upbringing like that. But even in that teaching, carrying guilt about being a kid or being in the way or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, with religion and things like that, I think a lot of people miss the point where it becomes this kind of these strict rules that doesn't allow us to like live our life. We do need to live life to gain experiences to make corrective actions. So it's kind of this cart before the horse thing. We're made to feel bad about things when we're starting out our life, when we're just trying to get going. A lot of times as a kid, you're just kind of naturally doing things. But then when we bring guilt and shame into it, now we have to suppress our expression. That can just kind of create a lot of problems there. I think a lot of people miss the point of a lot of these religious practices. It is to build this value system. A lot of healthy things are in there to be a good person, but then it's also up to the interpretation of the individual. So if somebody's really carrying a lot of guilt and shame themselves, that's the filter they're seeing these teachings through. And that's where we get kind of that harsh judgment that can be very suppressing. And with everything we talk about here, it's we're trying to find nuance. We're trying to find how do I navigate these things in a practical way? Because if I'm just lining up to a set of rules, that's a very like kind of broad category I'm trying to navigate. I'm trying to find my truth in that the teachings. And a lot of these things can be misinterpreted. They can be very harsh and judgmental, and it can really shut us down. It kind of many of us go through that experience where it's just like, oh, I don't like the teacher that was delivering the teaching. It's more of where that person's functioning from, where we start to take on a lot of these ideas. And then it's just like, yeah, we might throw away the whole system because we had bad teachers. That's kind of where the problem lies is it's like, how is this person living their life? Like, how are they actually applying these principles and ideas? Do they express joy and love in their life, or is it just all just really intense. There's a lot of ideas here that are interesting. A lot of guilt tripping from parents is common to get you to do things that maybe you don't want to do. I did all these things for you, so now you like owe me these things, right? There's all these kind of games that get played. All these things that it takes us away from ourselves. It takes us into this. Basically, it's to shut us down and we just kind of go along with things maybe that we don't agree with. So those are the things that are really painful is we feel like we're betraying ourselves in that process. And that's really probably what gets us stuck is I went along with things I didn't agree with, and then that created extra pain for me. It's hard to reconcile that because now not only is it hurting me, but then I'm also have bitterness and resentment towards the other person. So now it's like it's damaging relationship because it's like, well, I don't feel like I had a choice here, and it can really affect a lot of different dynamics. I think these are kind of the original wounds of many families. Is there may be some misinterpretations of how things should be done, and generally that comes across as harsh and very controlling. As a kid, like that's quite the opposite of your nature. Is come here being playful, expressive, like all those things, and when we're basically told that we shouldn't be that way, that that's wrong, that's kind of where this chain starts. Is I feel like I have to be something I'm not. I feel like I have to pretend to go along with things I don't agree with. And that's all under this guise of safety, or it could even, if we're talking about even the religious judgment, that could be like, oh, this is for my soul, like to save my soul, which is even more intense, right? That's like, it's taking these small ideas and making them super big, where it's now it's got this permanent consequence to it. And so that stuff is very difficult to navigate. We got to learn to go deeper and understand these things at a deeper level so we don't get caught up in I need to suppress myself and shut down my life in order to for my salvation or whatever it is. That can really shut down our life in so many ways. And I've really calibrated my teachings to not hurting other people. We talked about that last time. I think that's a good kind of gauge. Is I need to be able to experience things and to express myself and to experiment in terms of take new actions. Generally, when I hurt other people in that process, those are the things that we have a hard time forgiving ourselves for. And so that's what this work is it's going into that to try and learn the lessons so that we can learn to navigate in a cleaner way. The idea of like kind of morals and values is intertwined into this, where we're trying to just live a clean life in terms of I can pursue what I want and I'm not hurting other people in the process. I think generally, if we do have a lot of guilt and shame, we're starting to disconnect from our feelings because those are intense feelings generally. Then we get very much in our mind where we start to form a lot of these rules of like, if I do this, I'll be safe. If I do this, I won't get in trouble. We start kind of mapping things out. And so we have all these kind of walls that we can run into that way of I basically adopt my own set of rules that keep my life safe, but it's at the expense of me having freedom and being able to pursue things and to basically break out of the box. These things basically create this box, these limitations. And that's what an internal conflict is like I want something, but I believe I can't have it. Okay. And I can't have it because I'm protecting myself from pain. So that's where all the shame and guilt really keeps us locked into the rules rather than learning about how I navigate my life. I made mistakes and I need to clean that up. And the way I clean that up is I admit when I'm wrong. And I also learn about how to do it better next time. And that's all we're trying to do is we're trying to make progress. We're trying to head in the right direction and experience these things because there's the intellectual understanding of things. And so many people, yes, oh, I read the book and this is what the book says. But that's just, we're staying at the level of the mind. And we need to experience it now to actually start to apply principles and ideas. And so that is going to take some experimentation. That's going to be taking me trying new things so that I can start to conceptualize like what this really means for me and like how it applies to my life and how I can really implement these learnings that I'm getting on paper. So life happens in the day to day in how I show up and the steps I take. It's not just in the classroom. It's not just in the church. It's not all those things. It's just like, how do I carry this stuff with me It's going to be how I'm living my day-to-day life, because that's what's actually real. I think the point gets lost on a lot of this stuff oftentimes. The thing is, at its core, I think there's a lot of good things in religion. I think there's a lot of good things in a lot of systems. But when we just have these strict rules that if you don't do it this way, you're wrong, now we've lost that ability to act on things, because I start getting very hesitant. I'm afraid that I'm going to make a mistake and I have to do everything perfectly. And so that starts to increase the pressure we put on ourselves. And it basically sets us up for failure, because there's many like walls I can run into where like, oh, as soon as I did that, like now I'm a bad person, and I might make that part of my identity now. And now I'm dipping into self-punishment where I don't actually want good things for myself because I feel like I'm a bad person or I don't deserve good things. A lot of these things they're pretty intricate traps, to say the least, where it's like we get stuck mentally at these earlier stages. And it's because we haven't evolved our thinking past the blanket rule. We have to find the space in between to see like, okay, how do I actually apply these things? How do I actually live this out? And there is a lot of good stuff there. It's just we have to allow ourselves to go there. We have to allow ourselves to experience it. And so that's really that foundational piece of you learn by making mistakes. So none of us like came here knowing how to function properly in society. We're supposed to be taught those things. And sometimes the way they're taught to us, like it doesn't give us much freedom. It's pretty limiting. And so we can't experience these things the way we need to actually integrate them into our lives. So yeah, it's super interesting stuff. And this interplay of guilt and shame, that's what makes people stuck. That's what makes people sabotage. That's what damages relationships. Once again, we talk about the things we have shame around. We think we're alone with that stuff. But so it can be really isolating. And that's why we don't get help. We don't go seek people that can maybe walk us through what happened and how I can see it differently in order to continue to move forward. I'm just in this place of like, I'm a bad person and nobody's ever going to love me or nobody's ever going to trust me. Whatever it is we've attached to it, it's it can be really punishing, and it's isolating, and that's where we start suppressing and shutting ourselves down. And so we basically tie our mind into knots where I don't have any forward movement because I'm so afraid that I'm going to make a mistake. Okay. And so it's all this stuff is about opening it up. It's about coming to peace with your past, and that is these ideas of forgiveness and accepting responsibility, and because that's what gives us access to see those situations differently. And then we are all individuals, and I'm a big believer in universal principles, meaning, yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about when this work is calibrated to I'm able to take actions without hurting other people. I don't have to shut down my life completely. So those are universal ideas of we're talking about giving and receiving and like acting in a clean way. Because if I do hurt another person, that I am going to feel that on some level. And if I don't take the steps to clean that up, like that is going to affect me moving forward. And sometimes these things are small, sometimes these things are big. And the bigger they are, the more paralyzed we'll feel, but then also the stronger our ego gets because it's wrapped in this like self-identity where it's trying to prove me right all the time. It's designed to protect me. That's where I have a hard time admitting fault is in the painful things that I'm not willing to look at. And it may mean like yeah, I may have intentionally or unintentionally done some things to hurt somebody. I don't know how to handle that. So I'm going to pretend like I didn't. I'm going to avoid that, pretend like it didn't happen. And that's those avoidance patterns are powerful because now it's just like in the back of my mind, I'm storing all this negative information about myself. Bringing the stuff to the light, facing it in truth, you can really move on from just about anything if you're willing to do that work. Once you do that, now you're free of those emotional chains. And that's what we see guilt and shame as is they really are chains that like shut our life down. And then they also put our mindset in this negative place where I'm seeing myself as a bad person on some level. And that really affects how I interact with people and how I move forward. So this idea of so what guilt really does to us is it is heavy. It weighs on us psychologically and physically. And it's so powerful because once again, we're taking something that happened or an event and And sometimes we didn't even do anything wrong. Sometimes it was just somebody else's interpretation of our actions, like a caregiver or a teacher who may have been dealing with their own stuff and they might not have a clean perception, but we might have like gone against one of their rules. This is powerful because like once I take it into myself and I really start to believe it, now it's like I'm wrapping it up in my identity. Rather than it's something that happened, it's like it comes up to be like who I am. Once I get to this point of who I am, now there's no separation. It's integrated into who I am. So that's where everything I'm doing is coming from that place. When we do this work, what we're trying to do is depersonalize. We're trying to detach. These things do weigh heavily on us, and they really do shut down so many things. So there's the healthy guilt, like in terms of if I did something wrong, I'm going to feel that. But then once again, that if we just leave it at that level, it's like, okay, well, if I can see how I could have done better, now I can do that cleanup work. I recognize I was wrong here. I can have that conversation. I can do better next time. But where we get into trouble is kind of the condemnation thing, where I'm starting to beat up on myself. I'm starting to make that part of that one event is like who I am. And so that's what we would say is like toxic guilt because it's destructive. It builds this negative self identity, and now I'm just continuously running from that. And the things that are unconscious that we're not dealing with, we're motivated to play that stuff out in our life. So even if I'm avoiding it, it's still going to be showing up because it's always being pulled to the surface so that I'll look at these things because this is the stuff that actually holds people back. And the guilt often makes us replay these scenarios in our head. So there's initially this recognition where I'm trying to learn about it. So my mind's playing the scenario out over and over again. But if I just continue to play those tapes and then tell myself bad things about myself in that process, that's where I start to transform it into this toxic heavy thing. But if I'm replaying it in my mind and I'm like scanning it, trying to see how I can see it differently and what I can do to reconcile this to what allows us to move forward. So it's just like we're replaying these things in our head, but we're also, what am I doing with that? Am I learning from it or am I using it to punish myself? And so those are kind of the two roads. And unfortunately, like when we're kids, generally we have very limited understanding and we don't have that development yet where we're able to do that. So oftentimes the stressful things around us that are happening, we make them about ourselves and we actually make it mean negative things about ourselves. So this is really where confidence starts to take a hit, where I start suppressing my expression is going to be like, if there's volatile people around me and they're angry all the time, I'm going to make that mean, hey, that's like something I'm doing. That's something I did that's creating that. And, as we become an adult, we start to see the complexities of life where that's really not true. Like it could have been like financial stress or career, whatever it is they're dealing with. As you experience those things, you start to understand it better. But the problem is that some of these ideas get locked in at a very young age. And it really prevents us from stepping forward and building confidence and those types of things. We're basically wiring ourselves to sabotage and play small. If we're not helped through those things to help regulate the stressful events that happen. So if we're left to our own devices as a kid, we're generally going to make that mean negative things about ourselves. That's kind of where this can be really damaging is we could be playing out ideas for the rest of our life that if somebody just kind of sat with us and helped us work through it, we wouldn't have to be that way. So what we can do now is we can take a look at that stuff and question it and take it, try to see the different lens, try to see the bigger picture. When we're depersonalizing, that's all we're doing is we're zooming out and we're trying to find, okay, how can I see the situation and that allows me to release the guilt, that allows me to unpack the shame and untie this thing from my identity and just kind of see it as something that happened. It's not who I am.
Yeah, you made me think about like the Brene Brown work, where she talks about it from the shame lens a little bit more, I think, as opposed to guilt, but this idea of like something happens and then you make it I am bad rather than I did something bad
Mhm,
and the difference between that.
mhm.
So that kind of ties in with that more toxic feeling of guilt for sure.
The stories we tell ourselves over and over again, that's what determines our reality and our experiences. And yeah, I mean, everything kind of it starts at the guilt level of like, I feel bad about this, but a lot of times as we're feeling bad about it, now that we start to bring it into ourselves and now I am bad. So the shame is that kind of transformation from guilt into the shame. It's going to be personalizing that as part of my identity. And so these things interplay. So it just really keeps us from moving forward. We're locked in this kind of mode of like, oh, now I need to like go people please everywhere. I need to make this okay somehow. And we're doing it through these actions that probably don't make sense. It's just it it makes us question ourselves. It makes us play small. But then now it's just like I'm giving up so much because I feel bad about something. When we give things, we want to be doing it from a centered place of like, I'm doing this because I want to, or out of the kindness of my heart, or whatever it is. But not like I'm coming at a deficit where I'm doing this because I feel guilty. Now that's where I have resentment. That's where I have all these problems that start to come from. It's really just kind of seeing it as like, well, yeah, this is making me more submissive. This is making me more in this place where I don't feel like I'm participating in my life because I don't trust myself anymore. And so basically I'm allowing other people to dictate my life because it's just like I'm a bad person. And so now like, yeah, who am I to take these steps? Who am I to do these things? And so it's trying to ease that guilt so that we can see it differently where, hey, like things happen. We make mistakes, we learn from them. And it doesn't have to go much beyond that if we have the right mindset about it. But once it does transform into this shame of like, it's part of my identity now it's like I start shrinking down to kind of fit into this mold because because I don't feel deserving or worthy of stuff. It is really interesting to see. But so it creates self-sabotage because every time something good starts to happen, if I have a program in me that says I'm bad, now it's like I'm going to intentionally cause problems there. I'm going to do because I'm at conflict with it. I can't receive it because I don't feel like I deserve it. Okay, so I'm going to do things to push it away. You see this a lot in relationship, right? When somebody finally finds somebody that they really connect to, they try to ruin it right away. I'm not able to be loved, so I'm gonna like push them away. I'm gonna do destructive things just to sabotage it, right? And so these are all common things we see, but that's where it's coming from. It's coming from this place of I don't deserve it. I'm not good enough. I'm bad. And the distinction is like some things we're carrying like aren't even ours to carry. It's just a caregiver may have projected it onto us and we took it as our own when we actually didn't do anything wrong at all sometimes. So we could be basically building our self-identity on these lies and it's really handicapping us moving forward, believing the stuff that like I was just like being me. I was just playing outside or whatever. There was nothing like serious that happened, but if I have an intense person around me that isn't in tune with themselves and they have all this guilt and shame, they're going to be projecting that onto me. And when we're young, we can't filter it out. We just kind of accept it as our own. And so that's where a lot of these things start. It's really sad because it doesn't like have to be that way. But it's through that because this is the thing that sabotages our success primarily. If I do wake up and I'm trying to take the steps, like the sabotage is going to come to the surface. And with that, I'm going to have the guilt and shame that's going to come to the surface for me to examine. And like we talked about many times, the painful events, like that's what drives us to really focus and get good at things. So skill development's intertwined in here. But once again, it's like, is this the thing that's holding me back from my follow through, from my success? And is this what's causing me to procrastinate? Like those types of things. That's where we kind of look at this deeper level.
I'm wondering if you can say a little bit about, because we talk about these things a lot, like these are conscious decisions that people are making
Mhm.
when they might not actually be. If you have somebody who's new to this kind of work or hasn't done a ton of self-awareness kind of reflection, things like that, they may be doing these things, having these feelings, aware of guilt, shame, whatever, but not understanding how to break the pattern.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm just wondering if you can just say like a little bit about the difference between like consciously choosing these things versus these are unconscious patterns that you're repeating until you find a better way.
Each time it comes up, that's our opportunity to go a little bit deeper into it. So with all this stuff, we have to have this ability to feel the discomfort associated with it. And so I might have the recognition that I'm sabotaging. And I've certainly had clients that have that awareness. They're just like, yeah, I just keep sabotaging. I don't know why. It's these deeper layers of let's feel that. Let's see what's behind that. And it's just going to be linked to early childhood stuff generally. There's going to be some core beliefs that you formed about yourself. And we only get access to that if we allow ourselves to sit in that feeling of like, why do I feel this way? And just be okay with the heaviness and the discomfort so that we can explore it and we can start to ask some questions about it because I mean, I said whatever is conscious in my mind now, like it's something that's unconscious that's been pushed to the surface, but the unconscious is where the core issue is. That's where like the root is that we have to get to. And that there might be a lot of layers protecting that. When it's like if I've built something into my identity, odds are is like I have all these kind of safety beliefs built into it that continually reinforce that core idea, right? So I have to keep unpacking, okay, like if I have this target I've set where, okay, I'm going to keep moving towards it. I'm going to do the work as it surfaces because that's what it's designed to do is like if I have a desire and I go to pursue it, as I take the steps forward, the internal conflicts are going to start to surface. It's going to show me what's holding me back. So each time one of those reactions come up, or I feel like I want to sabotage this, or I have this impulse to do something that I know is going to damage it, that's where we have to learn to sit with it. But it's sometimes, honestly, sometimes doing nothing is the most powerful thing you can do because that forces you to face what you're feeling. And when you do that, you start to get some information about why you believe what you believe. Okay. You might get some images or memories or some flashes of some things. Things might be coming up in your dreams, like that play out scenarios that are all clues to like what you've buried deep inside. And this work is really about excavating that. It's about like, hey, these are these are flawed programs, meaning like you told yourself bad things about yourself, and now that's what's preventing you from breaking free. That's what's like driving all the behaviors that are sabotaging things is this underneath stuff. And it's generally I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this, like those types of things. And you didn't like come here with those beliefs, like those were put on you. Every baby that comes into this world doesn't have all these hardwired limitations into themselves, right? It's all taught. And so that's where we have to go to see like where these things first started. Where did they come from? And because yeah, generally it's like you're very present and you don't worry about stuff until your environment basically tells you you need to be worried about it. And it's generally through intense negative emotion where it creates these, and it might not even be this massive trauma that happened. It could be like I was in gym class and I got picked last or something, or it could be small stuff like that of like, oh, and then from that I formed this idea that like nobody likes me or I'm not good enough, or these things could be smaller, or it could be I raised my hand and somebody laughed at me. It could be any of that type of stuff where if you weren't helped through those stressful moments, what were small things on the surface could actually been like big pivotal things for you. So that's what's kind of tricky about this is there's generally layers and levels to all this, but it's just this desire to kind of get back to deserving, get back to your self-worth, get back to your confidence. And so as we do that work, we have to let go of the guilt and shame that's created the opposite.
Let's talk a little bit about how I think this is very similar to our last two episodes in terms of how we take one of these negative things and make it about growth. So let's talk about turning guilt into growth.
We're always talking about the importance of a perspective shift here because that's really what healing is it's when I like see something through a different lens and I see it in a way that gives me access to better feeling emotion. So I'm trying to neutralize the negative emotion and I do that by shifting how I see it. And that's not under the guise of like toxic positivity where everything's wonderful or and magical or whatever. It's more of just like, okay, well, most situations are complex and I may have formed a lot of ideas around something that was very surface level thinking. So if I was a 5-year old and I started creating a story, that story might not make sense today, or it might be just like these small blanket little thoughts. Okay. And so all we're trying to do is zoom out and see a bigger picture to being like, okay, what was actually going on here? That is through reframing how I see something. That's what allows me to free up the emotions that are stuck. Okay. Because when I tell myself this negative story over and over again, I hammer that into my nervous system. And so basically the more I tell myself something, I start forming beliefs on it, and those beliefs are generally limitation in order to protect me from some pain that's been created here. That's why we go into the pain, is to learn about it. And it's not this intense like re-experiencing of the pain. It's just, oh, I'm gonna bring my focus and attention to it, and I'm gonna try and see it differently. And as I can see it differently, I'm starting to soften the pain behind it. I'm starting to process it and release it. That's what we're really trying to do here, is we're trying to shift these mistakes, which I may have had this immature mindset when these ideas were formed. And so I'm trying to mature those emotions. And that means I'm seeing a broader version of the story. That's also the nuance of like, okay, what's my part in it? What's the other people's part in it? The more information I know about other people, like where they came from, what they've been through, things like that, that can speed up the process of like, oh, I understand why they did this to me is because this happened to them. We start to see more of the chain. We view these mistakes as teachers. They're not life sentences. Okay. It's not something I have to carry with me forever, but my nervous system's going to carry it with me until I decide to look at it and do the work to release it. So that's how it becomes a life sentence, is I avoid it, because I'm not actually looking at it. So I'm just going to be running these default programs where I'm going to operate in these patterns that keep me safe, but that also shrinks my life. And so releasing guilt doesn't erase accountability. It transforms it into responsibility. As I'm looking at these things, as I'm trying to understand them, okay, now I'm starting to see, okay, what was my part in this? And as I do that, what I take responsibility for, now I can start to transform those emotions, and I can transform the story I'm telling myself from. But if I'm just in this place of blame or excuses or justification, any of those ego ideas of like, hey, I'm perfect and it's just somebody else, now I can't change that at all. So when we take responsibility, whatever we take responsibility for, now I can change that. Okay. And that's how we produce better results, is like, yeah, whatever happened, I'm going to bring it back into myself so I can learn about it. And from that place, I can start to process the emotions behind it and look at the situation differently. And that's going to lead me to taking new actions. A lot of times we feel like maybe we have to hold other people accountable in order to set us free. And I would argue it's like most of the work that we do, it doesn't really need anybody else. It's how is this showing up in your nervous system? We're going to start unpacking that and rewiring it. So it's just like I can come to peace with any sort of emotion independent of anybody else. Okay. Because that's what I can control. And that may take me taking some new actions, or me actually having conversations with people if I feel like I was wronged, or maybe I wronged them. That might be part of unlocking it fully, where we can actually release the guilt because I took it to its completion, meaning I've cleaned up the guilt now that I can free myself from it because I've worked all dynamics of it. So I don't need to carry it anymore. And that's really what we're talking about, is it's releasing it from your nervous system so that it stops playing these old tapes. And so you can actually move forward. Because a lot of times people will be like, oh, like this person said they forgave me or I forgave them. But you're going to like feel it in your body when you're like actually done with something. And that means it's all the emotions gone, all the negative stories gone. You've like basically neutralized it. So you're not stuck in this place anymore. So there's the surface level mind idea, but then there's also the integration process, which is me actually like feeling whole and complete again because I've fully let go of all these things. That's the thing. So these things are intricate and they have layers and levels to them. And so we just try to unpack it, whatever is at the surface, whatever is ready for us to move, we're going to have a sense of that, being like, okay, why does this thing keep showing up? I keep telling myself these negative things about myself here. Like, what are some small steps I can do to see that differently? And basically we're just trying to unload what we can each step of the way. And because in that tension that we're carrying, each step of the way, there's a new lesson for us to learn in that. So that's how I deepen my learning. That's how I mature my emotions. is I start to climb that ladder from the negative to the neutral to eventually the positive, where I see the gift that came out of the situation. And so that's what we do when I resolve a situation, it's completing that cycle. Is I'm taking it all the way. Now I've gained a lot of wisdom from that mistake or from that guilt I've been carrying. When I actually let go of it completely, I've basically mastered that situation now. So I know how to navigate my life in a clean way where I'm not fearing running into that problem again because I understand it. So whatever we understand, we no longer fear. Okay. And so that's why it's really important to take a look at this stuff, because if we're avoiding it, we're not actually learning about it. And we're just creating all these workarounds, but it's going to come back to haunt us at some point because it's all locked in our nervous system. And we're just trying to open that up. We're trying to, how can I see it differently? How can I make peace with this? Is there some actions I need to take? How do I need to forgive myself as well? What does that look like for you? Because if we're in the self punishment, that's always going to lead to negative results. Like you see this commonly with men that are really out of touch with their emotions as well. I just need to develop discipline. I need to like force my way forward to like change my life. But in the same token, they're like hypercritical of themselves and they're self punishing. And so it's just like they're shaming themselves every step of the way, and they're wondering why that makes them feel worse, right? So it's about unlocking these things, and it is through that lens of self-compassion that we always talk about. If I can free myself up, now it's like I'm opening up space in my nervous system to create new things rather than just avoid patterns. Okay. So if I'm operating from shame, I'm just trying to continuously avoid that. And that might look like, oh, like I work out regularly now, or I got my finances together, or whatever it is. It might be like I've on paper, it looks like I've made a lot of progress, but it's all driven by the pain. Once we make the corrective action, it's just like, okay, how can I release the pain? Because that creates like a ton of drain on you. Like it's eating away at your mind. It's also creating all this tension and stress in your nervous system because you're basically pushing against the person you used to be rather than transforming and evolving the person you are. Okay. So it's like we basically have this version of us that we locked away and that we're not proud of. And you'll see this a lot of like maybe recovering addicts, things like that, of like they always talk negatively about the person they used to be. But that's the version of them that was operating on a lot of pain and they didn't know any better. But now that you know better, it's just like, okay, I need to free that version of myself too, to kind of restore that peace back to my nervous system. Cause otherwise I'm just running away from that person I used to be. And I'm still going to have all the triggers. I'm still going to have all the things that I'm trying to avoid. I'm just operating on willpower, which is why guilt, carrying it, will eventually lead to burnout. It's like I'm running from something rather than just being something. I'm having to maintain all this extra stuff just to not be that person I don't like. It's more of just like make peace with the person you don't like and learn the lessons. And now you're free of it. And that doesn't take any extra energy. It actually creates a lot of peace and joy within yourself because you're no longer in this place of shaming.
Let's talk a little bit about things that we can do. I mean, we've hit that kind of point of the podcast, right? Let's talk about the things we can do to release the guilt or to move past it.
When we're talking about releasing guilt, first step is kind of always in any change, it's awareness, right? So we need to kind of name it. We need to get an idea of what we're actually dealing with here. Like you opened with some podcasts, right? There can be religious guilt. This is driving me to like hate religion now or something. But when we're pushing against, ultimately, I want to align with what I want. I want to come to peace with my past. So it doesn't have to be me fighting against something. It's more of just what's right for me. And so we want to start to get a sense of what we're working with here, whether, yeah, it was a parent that guilt tripped us all the time or made us believe these negative things about ourselves, or a teacher, a coach, whatever it is. We want to get a sense of what this is, what we're carrying. And we also want to start to clear the judgment from it, because we all have these levels we're operating on, and the problems at one level, that's what like holds us back at the next, right? So it's like I have to come to peace with things rather than always pushing against it. So I want to start to create that awareness. I want to start to implement some sort of self-forgiveness here. So rather than making it part of my identity, I'm trying to create space or distance from it, meaning I can let this go in some way. And so the way we do that is through understanding and learning. So So I learned this from the mistake I made rather than I'm a bad person because I did this. We're starting to create some space here where I'm viewing this as like a natural process of life of like we're all going to make mistakes. We all do things we're not proud of. And if I keep it in that form now that life sentence, and so I need to shift the language I use, and we're dipping out of the guilt and shame and more into like, yeah, this was a learning lesson. I learned a lot from it. And if we're actually learning from it, it is going to naturally change us. We're gonna shift who we are. We're gonna start to have a more calm energy because we're no longer punishing ourselves. So some sort of self-forgiveness where I can start to detach this thing that happened from who I am. And we do that work to try and feel better about who we actually are. And I don't need to punish myself for this anymore. And that there may be some cleanup work involved there. So we go into repair whenever possible. So that might be, once again, admitting fault, which we talked about last week. What can I do to make this better? It's really, we're staying out of the punishment. How can if I need this person's permission to let this go, if that's going to be helpful for me, I might need to take some corrective action with somebody. And a lot of times that is just like these genuine apologies, like, hey, like I was wrong here. This is what I was thinking. This is where I was functioning from. I see the problems with that, and I'm working to correct those actions so that it's better in the future. So that's really what the repair work looks like. Is there some things I need to do to clean that up? And then next is going to be embodiment. So we're trying to integrate everything. We're trying to get it out of this level of the mind and like into who we are. And so we're trying to create peace in our nervous system. And so that's going to be deep breaths and it's going to be self compassion. And that's going to be, we might want to visualize things of like seeing ourselves in a better light, seeing ourselves as who we want to become. And also kind of dropping these chains or releasing all the burdens attached to them. We want to start to feel lighter about it because that's what starts to ease our mind is if we're seeing the situation differently. So if I've learned the lessons from it, if I've made the changes, which happen naturally when you learn the lessons, what am I even carrying this thing for? It starts to not make sense to punish yourself when you got what you needed from it. When you learn the lessons, when I have this deeper understanding of myself and in my place in the world, so I no longer need to carry all that stuff with me, and that's where we start to free it up. So it is just getting things to move through the body, this working out, stretching, yoga, meditation, things like that. We're just trying to move the heaviness out because that's what our mind is responding to is that tension, that tightness. And so as I start to transform it, it starts to release.
So share a little bit about what it can feel like on the other side, releasing the guilt, moving past it.
With this, it's really just we have these burdens we carry. It is like tangible, like we can feel heavy. But if I've felt heavy my whole life, like I might not know what it's like not to carry these things, right? And so that can be an instance where it's just like, oh, this is just normal for me to feel tight and locked up all the time or whatever. We're trying to breathe new life into the nervous system. We're trying to create space so that things can flow better, so that, we actually feel like the tension is lessening. But yeah, it's just generally it's going to feel weights lifting off your shoulders. It's generally going to feel like my mind's not as consumed with these things. It's not as I'm not as hypercritical of myself when I make a mistake. I start to form this healthier relationship with myself that's based on self-compassion. And so in that freedom, we get to be more authentic too, because a lot of times when we're carrying the guilt and shame, we have all these workarounds where we're we're adjusting ourselves. We're not showing up fully as we are. It's because we're trying to hide these aspects of ourselves. So it's like I'm having to basically that's where we get in those games of I'm just presenting a self-image to the world that I think people want to see. It's so as I start to make peace with the things I feel shame and guilt about, now it's like I don't really have to put on a show. I don't have to perform anymore because I can just be me. It's so much less energy that we're using by being authentic because it's just like a natural flow. You don't have to think about it. There's no strategy involved. It's just because the strategy is only workarounds from I'm trying to show this person who I think they want me to be but that's built on the things I feel ashamed of. So I'm trying to hide that stuff in the process. We get very in our head. We try to navigate situations it can be kind of awkward and choppy or it can be disconnected. This is like an emotional intelligence piece where it's just like you don't really have to try for authenticity. It's more of we only have to work at it when we're carrying the shame. So as we start to free that up, it just things can naturally flow from us. We can speak deeper about ourselves and we're not trying to hide anything. And so the guilt is really going to be replaced by self-respect, responsibility, and responsibility without shame. Okay. So yeah, as I'm a human, I'm going to be living my life. I may make mistakes here and there. If I take responsibility for those, I'm not going to internalize shame. I'm gonna acknowledge it and I'm going to do the work to clean it up in the moment, which is like kind of this idea we didn't have that ability when we were growing up. Like we just absorbed all this stuff and we didn't really know how to clean it up. But as an adult, when you take on that responsibility now, oh, okay, I was wrong here. This is what I need to do to reconcile this. It doesn't have to be this huge loaded process where I'm making my mistakes part of my identity anymore. It's just like it's this acceptance that I'm not perfect and I am going to make mistakes and so does everybody else, right? And so we start to have that space for other people as well. So as I create self-compassion within myself, I basically let other people off the hook more, right? Where I'm not kind of fearing their judgment or what they're going through. It's just like, because I understand myself better, I'm going to understand other people better. And so when we're operating from that self compassion, we can be more honest and we can have deeper relationships with other people because we're stepping out of the performance aspect. So we talk about the mask or needing to perform or show a certain side of ourselves to be accepted by other people. We only do that because of the guilt and shame. And so as we start to unpack that, it's just you can just be you more often, right? That's really the key here is it is incredibly freeing, but then there is less strategizing. You can just be more present because you're no longer worried about maintaining the image anymore. And because we've dissolved the things you're trying to hide behind the mask.
So, just for a little bit of a wrap up or closing, maybe give kind of your final thoughts around this idea of permission to release guilt and just put a bow on this conversation a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. So I think it's many times I think we've like punished ourselves enough. When are we going to let it go? Because it's just like it doesn't need to be this lifelong thing. It's like we're all human. Things happen. It is about stepping into your worthiness and deserving and all those things. And it's odds are is you're trying hard. Odds are is you're working at things. It's just this stuff is standing in your way. And it's a good prompt to think of what guilt are you still carrying that's holding you back? What thing will you not forgive yourself for? Like what and why are we using that as our excuse to play small and to not live our lives and those types of things? So it's odds are is you've already paid a price for it and you continue to on some level. And so that's never going to get us anywhere, right? It's only diminishing returns over time where because a lot of these times we've like learned the lesson already. It's just like we're still carrying that part too. It's about setting that down and allowing ourselves to do that and just really kind of creating that freedom to be yourself again. We don't have to hide from things the rest of our lives. We've all made mistakes and it's about facing them and kind of seeing them. Yeah, this was a stage of my life. These are the things I was going through. It's not saying it's all okay. It's just being like, well, I was doing the best I could and I've learned from that now and I don't really act that way anymore. So I don't have to carry all that shame and that guilt. So it's about that creating that freedom. And so just kind of scan yourself and try and explore like, okay, where do I still feel really guilty about something? Will I not where I'm not forgiving myself? And you might get some good insights there. If you need some help going through this process, this is commonly a subject that I work with clients. Guilt and shame are really kind of at the core of so much. If you'd like more information, you can go to my website, brandonthielk.com, and you can schedule a free strategy session with me. It's 30 minutes where I just get to know you a little bit better and make the case for this work and how I can support you and how we can move these things a lot faster, right? So that's really the goal is it's an accelerated process because they're not personal to me. Like I can help guide you through it so you can get those perspective shifts faster. So that's really the purpose of it. And you can register for my newsletter, the Lightning Report. I send out each Monday with what's going on in the business and some insights and reflection for the week. You can register for that on my website. And also, we'll be doing a group event up here in Madison, outside of Madison, Wisconsin, the end of October, October 25th. So that's going to be an opportunity for some live coaching and some deeper teaching of these principles. So if you have any questions, please reach out. Please like, comment, share. We'd love your support. We'd love to hear from you to see how I can better serve you. Thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, I'll talk to you later then, Brandon.
All right, I'll see you.